start off by apologizing that we haven't really put together one of these podcasts in a little while, and part of that was we had some changes here at 4IR, and I thought it was appropriate for us as we reestablish and talk about on a regular basis our Heads in the Cloud podcast that we introduce some new members for 4IR. Today we're going to meet with Randy Rausch. Randy is the VP of Engineering for 4IR and leads our development practice and our technical implementation. So, hey, Randy, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's
Well,
really great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say welcome to 4IR. I mean, it has been a few months, and you've had a chance to really dig in deep and take charge of our development pipeline. But I bet the folks are maybe wondering a little bit more about who you are and kind of what brought you to 4IR. So if you wouldn't mind giving us just a quick history as to kind of what your previous roles were and why 4IR was the choice for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love being at 4IR. It feels like it is the perfect fit for me as you grow in your career and learn the types of things that you really enjoy and what you want to do and what brings joy and meaning. It's pretty great, man. So thanks for the opportunity. I started out at General Electric, a 300,000 person company, and worked in some 3-person companies and 300,000. Worked through early on a lot of the computer science, a lot of the controls, a lot of edge computing, things like that. Had a chance to start my own business for a while. Started up right during the middle of COVID, which turns out not to be a great time to secure new customers in the local government space. Helped out making some vaccines with Cytiva shortly thereafter that, had some experience with system integrator and found my way here to 4IR. So it's from a technology perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of we've been doing a lot at high availability, at cloud native, but also a lot of edge in my background, looking at a lot of DevOps and how do we make things more reliable. And I really enjoy getting hands-on. I like to submit some PRs. Well, whether they're any good or not is up to the technical team, but it's important to me to be hands-on, but also take advantage of the skills that I've learned in, developing teams and things like that through my GE training and some of the other companies. So it's been really fun to put all these different things together and grow a small team up while getting hands-on and delivering stuff that really matters to our customers. So perfect fit for me. Absolutely love it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been great seeing you take a hold. Also getting to know you a little bit better as you and I have interacted over the last. I think it's been just over 7 months now, or 6 months maybe. My math is probably a little bit off, but yeah, time flies when you're having fun. So you mentioned a couple of things that you've been working on, and I know Edge is something that 4IR has been doing for a little while, but there's been some pretty significant improvements with our Edge offerings over the last little bit. Can you maybe talk about a little bit what we've been doing in that space and kind of where we're headed?
Yeah, sure. And I'd like to put it in terms of what I'll call cloud native. Cloud native doesn't necessarily mean cloud, it's in the cloud. But there are a lot of really good architectural choices and design choices, treating things like cattle, not pets. And we can get into that with maybe one of your new analogies in a little bit. But how do we take these best practices of managing things at scale and bring them down to a place where you're on-prem and maybe things aren't managed by a professional data center team, and you have to have a way to remotely manage an update without rolling trucks, as they call it, to send a person on site eats quite a bit into margin, and it's slow to fly somebody somewhere. So you want to make sure that if you're managing things on-prem, which is often needed for latency or other issues, that you can completely, fully manage from bare metal all the way up. So that's making sure you've got the right level of operating system, the right level of security, making sure that you can apply patches, making sure there's failovers in case the power goes out and in the middle of doing one of your patches, and really having that solid, secure foundation that is remotely manageable in a way that makes sense for OT security teams. So I had been fortunate enough to have a lot of experience in many different companies in terms of what works well with corporate IT security teams, what works well from managing at scale, and bringing all that and applying it to our new capability at 4IR so that we can host your factory stack workloads on-prem if you need to, and do that at high availability and do that at scale so that we can keep things running smoothly at low cost.
Awesome. So for those that maybe don't quite understand what the difference between what Randy just described and maybe the way things have been done in the past is. In the past, you would have RDP access or VNC or maybe something like a team viewer to go in and make changes or manage an operating system or manage a set of applications. What this is a much deeper tool set that lets you manage down to the bare metal and be able to have the capability to manage it as if you were physically there. So you think about the things you do when you're physically there, things like pushing buttons and recovering at firmware level. These are the kind of capabilities that you need to have in-house, or at least be capable of doing, to be able to manage assets remotely, completely remotely, and at scale. So, we think it's a big deal for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it allows for you to take advantage of economies of scale, automation tools, standardization, but also, if you look at the world of technical resources, it's not always easy to have the right technical resources with the right technical skill in all the remote locations that you need. Randy mentioned rolling trucks, but even just, if you have folks that are your local technical team and you're expecting them to be able to weld, solder, repair high voltage gear, and also deal with security patching on a Windows operating system, that might be a tall order for those individuals to be able to handle. And by using tools like Randy's describing, you can really be able to do that a lot easier and at scale for a lower cost.
Yeah, and the idea is let us do that for you, right? Patching things, making sure they're secure, keeping them up to date. Some of that grunt work stuff, it's not a super glamorous thing that maybe your engineers want to be doing. It takes some specific knowledge, and it's important to do well. And that's why we like providing that service to our customers, because it solves a real need, and it's something that we've been able to, with our scale and our economies and our technology, be able to do for at scale at good cost.
Yeah, and the risk you run by not doing it is, if you have out of date software and there's the latest vulnerability, which I think I can think of 3 from the last week that happened.
Crowdstrike.
That unfortunately it leaves you, that one's maybe an exception to the rule, because that one you couldn't really stop with. We could talk about that in lots of detail, but when something does propagate across a network boundary, which network boundaries are put in place in your Purdue model to try to prevent that from happening, but unfortunately there's just more and more holes poked between those levels and more need for you to have external accessibility to it, and maintaining and controlling all that access is very challenging. So unfortunately data breaches occur, and viruses and ransomware in particular gets into controls network because the controls aren't always as solid as they're supposed to be. What we think is that by using more modern IT-centric technologies for both deploying and managing those assets, you reduce your surface area for attack and you make yourself less vulnerable to those kind of things being able to get you. Again, that's the premise of our model. So,
and we should talk about some best practices there, right? So zero trust is a really good one. The idea of being, in the past you would have these layers in the Purdue model, and then your control network was the thing that was most trusted, and it was all about making sure that your less secure business stuff didn't make it down to your control. Well, a funny thing happened. The upper layers moved much faster, and they're on a much more secure. And now, oftentimes, the least secure network is your control network. But in any case, you never want to allow commands coming in from the outside or some sort of way to get in. Your firewall should be blocking all incoming. It's important that you should have outbound 443 SA. 443 means port 443 using TLS, transport layer encryption, to be sending information out to a known good source, making sure your allow list says I can talk to this and only this out, and receive commands back. Those commands that you take, it shouldn't be just SSH access into something. It should be, these are the commands that I allow, and only these commands, and only from this trusted source. And you've got, you're booting from your TPM hardware encryption modules. You've got your roots of trust in the cloud as well. You're securing that entire chain with a way that is known, good, and secure. And then you make sure that you rip out in your operating systems, your other areas, just don't even have the code to do stuff like your package apt-get updates and things like that may be more challenging to control. You want to make sure that you've got really good control. You have only the code that you need and everything else is ripped out to reduce that attack surface. So, there's things like that the cloud folks in the cloud have learned over the years. Applying that to the edge as well makes for security being paramount, but still being able to remotely administer and patch, bringing all those things together where security doesn't have to be the reciprocal of convenience. It can be baked in with everything that you do.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of acronyms in your last, but for those of you that don't know what they are, certainly we can help explain how all that works. I think the important thing for people to understand is that there's different ways to think about your computing technology now, and what I've said this on some other podcasts and other presentations recently is that I think the path to a more secure factory floor is by thinning and changing and removing operating systems from your space. Don't be fooled, because every controller has an operating system on it. Most VxWorks is fairly common and is used on a lot of North American VFDs and PLCs and other cards that have OSs on them as well. So everything essentially has to have some sort of operating system under it that can have some level of vulnerability. But what you do is, by hardening and removing the surface area, you make it harder to attack. So just like in Windows, disabling file and printer sharing and disabling DCOM, these are security necessities. When you start going outside of the Windows world into Unix, Linux-based environments, and you use something like containers that only contains the absolute minimum set of operating system capabilities that you need for that application, you just inherently made your system more secure because there's less stuff to go and attack. We think that's a principle that not a lot of people really understand or get how that applies to them yet, but that's something that kind of the leaders in this space we see as embracing very actively.
Using your principles of least privilege, reducing your attack surface. And it's probably worth mentioning or reiterating, the frequency at which you update is a really important thing for security, right? There's still many people in the industrial space that that have a Windows XP computer, and all they have to do is just make sure you don't touch that, because if I loaded an upgrade once and it shut down production, so I'll never upgrade again. Like, that's not a good way to be secure, right? There are vulnerabilities lurking, there are new things coming out all the time. You want to be able to make sure that you're patching these vulnerabilities that happen. If you just look up CVEs, that's another acronym that we can talk to, but some of your common vulnerabilities. There's a couple a day. Every day, new vulnerabilities are discovered. So if you're not patching those known vulnerabilities, you continue to increase your risk of something going wrong. So it's not about holding and fixing and never changing. It's about being able to make sure that as you update, you are not impacting your mission and your production, things like that. So it's important to have your integration testing and to have people being able to manage those updates so that you can continue to update and be secure while you run your operation.
So interesting tie-in with the Crowdstrike thing last week. I had a customer a couple of years ago ask me, hey, at what point are my operating systems so old that they're not going to be vulnerable because no one's building viruses that will attack them anymore? And I saw a couple of memes fly around that the airlines that weren't affected were still running Windows 3.1. I don't know how true that is, but I got a chuckle out of it because I had a kind of a relevant question from a customer, like I said, a couple of years ago. But if you talk to security experts, they generally say the best thing you can do to reduce your risk is keep your systems up to date. That's hard to do when automation vendors don't support updates, or they tell you that they only support this very specific version. That's why I think you see a lot of growth with vendors that are embracing more modern IT centric kind of methodologies and mentalities, like folks over in inductive automation. We see that as being kind of table stakes moving forward. There was something posted by some folks in the CISA, which is not the CSIA, CISA, about how the quality of software is really a big driver in the security posture that we have inside of the industry, and that having the maturity in the development and deployment and testing of software is one of the biggest security issues that we have kind of as a nation. And I think that's a really good point, and it's something that if you look at the rigor that some companies go through, and maybe some of the speed with which they're able to provide updates, and with the openness with which they are around vulnerabilities they have, I think you see that it's a very uneven playing field out there.
Yeah, and you see these companies that take advantage of DevOps and some of these automation, they're just able to be much more agile and adapt to the world around them and update faster. And making releases isn't this big, huge deal. It's just part of what they do all day, every day, and really good testing coverage so that they can adapt to the world as the world changes. And those are the companies that you're going to see continue to grow. The companies that really struggle with all this technical debt, that don't have good ways to update and have automation in place, they're going to struggle to keep up with everything that's happening in the industry.
Completely agree. So maybe a kind of I'll say a related but kind of side topic is, if you look at kind of the edge piece, and we obviously have been talking quite a bit about edge today and on-prem operating systems and how all that works. For those of you that aren't aware, there is a new project from the Linux Foundation called Margo. I really wish I understood why they called it Margo, but it says it's the Latin word for edge. Okay, so there's a bunch of companies involved with this right now that are building out some specifications and talking about how edge should be accomplished. And I'm keeping my eye on this right now. There's certainly a lot of interest from vendors like ourselves, as well as end customers. We think there's, edge is very much the next step in the evolution of factory floor and OT networking, and understanding how that can be done in a safe, secure, and scalable way is something that we've put a lot of energy and effort into, and I know there's a lot of attention from other organizations in this space as well. And this project certainly seems like it's pointing towards trying to create some standardization in that space.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is one of my favorite XKCD comics, where you start with a certain number of standards and says, oh my gosh, we need to bring these all together into another the ultimate standard. And now you have one additional standard competing. Standards are important, and bring them together is good. And it looks like there's some potential here. And, we'd love to, we don't have time today, but maybe do like an N-part series into all these different areas, and to talk about what they mean and what they don't, and how they affect what you're doing in your OT world. Because OT and IT, there are still some differences for good reasons. There's a lot of differences not for good reasons that are slowly starting to go away, but there's still a few things that are important to understand. And maybe we should help educate our audiences and get some additional input from others onto what we pulled together on that edge part. So lots to look forward to.
Yeah, and with that, we obviously could keep talking for a long time, but I bet our viewers and listeners are probably more excited for us to keep these as brief as we normally do. We might have gone a little longer this time than we normally do, but just wanted to make a quick announcement at the end of this conversation here that we will be at ICC this year, as we have been for the last several years. Both Randy and I have a couple of different. We're going to be speaking together, as well as we have our vendor exhibition. All the times will be announced shortly. ICC is Tuesday, September 17th until Thursday, September the 19th. If you haven't registered yet, go register, because it tends to fill up very quickly. The Harris Center is not a terribly huge venue, so I know every year we get at least a couple of people that are a few weeks away going, hey, can I still get into ICC? And unfortunately, the answer is usually no, because it does run out and fill up fairly quickly. So it is for us. I think we get a ton out of that week with customers and with integrators. We'd recommend that you guys consider it if it's something that's in your field.
It's going to be a good show. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, with that, we will sign off. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and please stay tuned for the next Heads in the Clouds.
Cheers.